According to a disturbing new report by Dropsite News, American forces are abducting and torturing some of the survivors on those boats the military is carrying out strikes against in the Caribbean under Operation Southern Spear. My name is Dina Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's get into this. Now, Dropsite News covers 3 specific boat strikes. One of those boats, no survivors have been found. The 2 other, there were 36 survivors, and those survivors give very similar accounts of what happened to them. One of the survivors said they were, quote, treated like animals by U.S. forces. Now, these 3 boats, the one that there is no survivors, one of the men on that boat called a family member concerned because they saw what was U.S. flight patrol. And they were worried because, of course, they've heard about these military strikes. But they had everything in order. According to the family member, they had been cleared by the Ecuadorian Coast Guard because they were, in fact, fishermen. But the family has not heard or seen from them since that phone call. And in fact, they have asked the UN to intervene. The United Nations Committee on Forced Disappearances has issued a letter demanding answers on that boat, the La Feria. Now, in terms of the second boat that talks about what happened to them, this abduction and torturing, the boat's name is La Negra Francesca Duarte II, and evidently they were struck on March 23rd. According to them, by the time they were found by the El Salvadorian Coast Guard, their limbs were mangled. Their backs had burns on them. One man's foot was spliced open, exposing the bone. Another had lesions on the nape of his neck that left him dizzy where he moved. According to one of the survivors, that one of the men, most likely the one who had the foot spliced open, was bleeding so much the lifeboat filled up with blood. Now, again, they say that they were cleared by the Ecuadorian Coast Guard, that they had all of their papers in order because they were, in fact, a fishing boat. They say that after their boat was hit, they were brought onto a boat, a U.S. flagged blue patrol ship specifically, that had the word Spear written on the side. As we know, this is called the Operation Southern Spear. They say that the men were blonde and spoke English, were heavily armed and camouflaged. They said that they were told to raise their hands up in English. The rest of the time, they were spoken to through a translator. They were then handcuffed, hooded, and put on the metal deck of the boat. For this boat, the survivors say for 24 hours, and they were blistering in the sun. They were then eventually transferred to the El Salvadorian Coast Guard, despite the fact that they were actually much closer to their home country of Ecuador. And the only reason they got back to Ecuador was because of their family members' insistence in following through and making sure that they were brought home. One of the survivors said that they began to pray, convinced they were going to die, when they were brought onto this American ship by the American forces. Very disturbing account of what seems to be unlawful actions by our armed forces against these men who did not have what seems to be any due process for any sort of crime that they did or did not commit. Now, the similarity now on the third boat, where the survivors there have a very similar account of, again, having their boats struck and then also being brought onto this patrol ship, this U.S. patrol ship. The other boat was called the Don Maca, and they were also eventually brought to the El Salvadorian Coast Guard, who then brought them to Ecuador. And one of the survivors on that boat said they were, quote, treated like animals. They were also hooded. They were also put onto the metal deck of the boat. They say they were left there for 8 days. The men said they received water, but not food. Now, the family members have representation. They have lawyers, and the lawyers are also speaking to Dropsite News. As we know, families have already filed lawsuits against the strikes against these boats, not these particular boats, but because this has been happening for quite some time. There are now 174 people dead from an action by our American forces that has not been approved by Congress and seems to be a violation of international law. Family members of survivors who say they are fishing boats have sued and have also gone to the UN. And these lawyers are speaking to DropSite News, talking about what has been happening to them by U.S. armed forces. Now, they also point out the fact that the fact that their boats were deliberately sunk and not salvaged, not tried to collect evidence from the boats, also proves that they were fishermen. The third boat also said that they had received all proper materials, registrations from the El Salvadoran Coast Guard to proceed. Now, this is similar to, in a way, what happened in New York Times reporting when Hegseth talked about how we hit the drug compound that was actually a dairy farm. And the fishermen and the lawyers talking about the fact that when Ecuador does indeed have a cartel boat that they seize, they usually lay out everything they have found and the men as a victory lap to show that they are kind of enforcing law and order. And the fact that this did not happen to them, that instead their boats were sunk and these men were not even brought back to Ecuador, but dropped off in El Salvador, was in itself also showing their innocence, because if they had found something that made them look guilty, they would have advertised it. So these men really giving this really disturbing account of what they're saying is happening by American forces. Now, this whole thing is also happening, as we know, off the coast of Ecuador. And Ecuador actually just passed by 60%. They upheld an existing constitutional amendment that said that foreign military cannot operate in their territories. Well, this seems to be us, U.S. foreign military operating in their territories. Happening also, this all happening at the same time as we see the Secretary of Navy being pushed out, the chaos that's happening with the Iran war, the fact that the USS Gerald Ford, the warship that was deployed to the Caribbean many months ago at the beginning of this Operation Southern Spear, is now the longest deployed warship since Vietnam. And when you ask yourself whether or not the actions of these soldiers, if they did occur, are as a result of their soldiers or as a result of the tone that has been set from the top, take a listen to Hegseth, who set the tone of the Pentagon, of the military, many months ago, when he talked about trying to make it anti-woke and instead be about the warrior and the killing. Take a listen.
First is we're reviving the warrior ethos. We want to get rid of the distractions and the debris. No more DEI. No more dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship and social justice and political correctness. We're done with that. We're unleashing the warfighter to be ready, trained, disciplined, accountable, and lethal. When you allow them to do that, they're incredibly good at their job, as the world has seen and as a indicted criminal in Venezuela found out about a week ago.
My favorite thing to do after long days is sit on a couch and pull out a blanket. I am a blanket person, and Lola blankets are by far my favorite blankets. In fact, they're the favorite of my entire family, so I've had to get more than one. And perhaps the best thing about it is that they still look and feel great, despite the fact that I have to wash it many times with the pets and the kids. I used to go through blankets fairly quickly because they just never looked or felt very good after multiple washes. The thing that is great about Lola blankets is that it is double hemmed for durability, so it doesn't pill or shed even after so many washes. And it's crafted with ultra soft luxury faux fur and a signature 4-way stretch that sets it apart. It has 20,000 5-star reviews, and once you feel it, you'll know why. It is called the world's #1 blanket. This thing is next level. And perhaps another great thing that I love about it is the fact that they donate a portion of their proceeds to breast cancer research. And they even have a Blanket for Brave program where they give blankets to people going through treatment. I have the large. It is perfect for cozying up solo or someone else, but they even have an extra large, which is massive. Plus they have weighted blankets for calming vibes and matching pillows. And right now, for a limited time, our listeners can get 40% off select Lola Blankets products with code MISTRIAL at checkout. Just head to lolablankets.com and use code MISTRIAL to get 40% off your order. After you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and let them know we sent you. Wrap yourself in luxury with Lola Blankets. And it bears repeating that if indeed American forces are illegally abducting people, are torturing survivors, this is of course against international law, domestic law, and also their own manuals. The Army manual, the Navy manual, the Air Force manual are under that torture is illegal. And following illegal orders is illegal. I mean, under the torture cases that came out of Iraq and Afghanistan, despite the fact that the DOJ had issued a memo basically giving legal cover for the enhanced interrogation tactics, that's what they call torture, the soldiers were still put on trial because despite any DOJ memo, it is illegal under their own manuals to commit torture. So it's not about whether or not Todd Blanche or whoever sits in the Attorney General's office decides to ever prosecute cases like this. It is their own courts, military courts and court martials. They, under their own manuals, prosecute cases like this. And so it should remember for any soldier who thinks they are carrying out an order or a tone set by Trump and Hegseth, instead, Trump and Hegseth are putting our soldiers in harm's way by somehow telegraphing that this is American, that this is ethical, that this is allowed, because it is not. Illegal orders are illegal, and they often do get prosecuted within the military court system. We will definitely be following the story. So much chaos coming out of the Department of War, Trump's new Department of War. But this, very important, putting in harm's way innocent people, and also, frankly, the integrity of our Defense Department. My name is Dina Doll. This is the MeidasTouch Network. If you haven't yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, be sure to do that. If you haven't yet followed the Mistrial podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, do that. And we have amazing sponsors in the description below. Check them out. So grateful for our Mistrial sponsors because they do not censor what I have to say in this moment.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.